The forest swallowed him whole. No trail, no gear, no goodbye. Search teams scoured the ridges for days. Helicopters circled. Dogs barked into silence. And still nothing. 3 years later, a storm ripped open the earth. A giant oak crashed down, and beneath its roots, a secret waited. Not a lost hiker, not an accident, but something far darker, buried where no one was meant to find it. October 14th, 2019, the morning air in Greenford County was cold, clean, and still. Daniel Harper, 39 years old, zipped up his hunting jacket and spread a map on the kitchen table. He marked the trail in red ink, Ridge 47, curving east toward an abandoned fire tower called Old Beacon. Emily, his wife, watched quietly as he traced every stop and wrote the time he planned to return. Daniel had a habit every trip into the mountains. He gave Emily the same words. If I'm not back by Monday night, call on Tuesday morning. She trusted him. He was meticulous about safety. His backpack sat ready by the door. 4 days of food, 2 water flasks, a weatherproof tarp, and a battered GPS unit that had guided him for years. Beside it leaned his hunting rifle, oiled and steady. He kissed Emily, promised he'd be home by Sunday evening, and walked to his silver pickup. The engine coughed once, then growled awake. The truck rolled out of the driveway and disappeared down the winding road toward the Stonecrest Mountains. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. By Monday night, Emily sat in the living room, staring at the clock. The silence pressed in, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. She told herself he might be resting at the trailhead, too tired to drive. But when Tuesday morning came, and his phone was still off, panic set in. Her hands shook as she dialed the county sheriff's office. Deputies listened, calm but firm. It wasn't unusual, they said, for hunters to return late. Still, they promised to send a patrol to check the trailhead at Mill Creek. An hour later, her phone rang. Daniel's truck was there, parked perfectly, locked, untouched. No shattered glass, no signs of theft. That detail cut both ways. No robbery meant he had walked into the woods of his own accord, but it also meant he never came back out. Wednesday morning, the search escalated. Rescue teams, deputies, and dozens of volunteers lined up in bright jackets. Dog handlers pressed leashes forward, canines barking at the scent drawn from the truck's seat. The trail swallowed the smell within 300 yards. Rocky ground gave the dogs nothing to follow. Handlers cursed under their breath, pulling the leashes tighter. A helicopter scouted above. Through the canopy, only a blur of autumn leaves showed red, orange, and thick as a carpet. From the air, no blue jacket, no silver gear, no movement at all. On the ground, searchers combed ravines and gullies. They shouted his name until their voices cracked. Every stream bed was checked. Every boulder turned. At first, optimism remained. Maybe he slipped and broke an ankle, waiting for rescue with rations in hand. Maybe he sheltered in a hollow overnight. But day after day, nothing appeared. Not a glove, not a torn scrap of fabric. The forest gave back no trace. Volunteers grew restless. Older locals muttered about the hollow taking its own, but deputies refused legends. They wanted facts. By Saturday, 4 days in, maps were spread across folding tables. The command post marked grids in thick black marker. Each sector combed, each ravine cleared, each ridge shouted through. Nothing. The man who knew these woods like his own skin had vanished without a sound, and his gear rifle, backpack, tent was nowhere to be seen. Sunday, the search widened 3 miles off his projected route. A small group stumbled into a hollow. They froze at the faint shimmer of ash among the damp leaves. A fire pit, the gray dust still warm enough to suggest it had burned within the last 10 days. Kneeling closer, one volunteer's hand brushed metal, 2 spent shell casings. They matched the caliber of Daniel's rifle. For the first time, there was proof he had been alive in these woods. Excitement flickered, then confusion. Why camp so far off his planned trail? And why fire only 2 shots? If hunting, where was the carcass? If signaling distress, why stop at 2? The questions multiplied faster than answers. The hollow was scoured inch by inch. No blood, no torn ground, no sign of a struggle. The fire pit sat silent, its purpose unknown. Dogs circled, then whined, unable to find a direction. Searchers raked leaves back, scanned tree trunks, pressed through thickets. Again, nothing. The illogic gnawed at them. Why abandon his backpack, his rifle, his food? A hunter doesn't leave life-saving gear behind. For 3 more days, the search swelled. Helicopters, ATVs, drones, every resource available. Yet the forest held its silence. Cold weather arrived early. Snow streaked the branches, soaking through gloves and maps. Coordinators faced a hard choice. After 12 days, the active search was suspended. The case file stamped, missing unclear circumstances. For Emily and the children, that phrase was a knife. No body to bury, no answers to tell the children why their father had not come home. Just a truck in the lot, in a hollow in the woods. Weeks turned into months. Neighbors lowered their voices when passing the Harper house. At church, Emily stood with her children, while others whispered. 1 year passed. Daniel's name became a cautionary tale. The Stonecrest Mountains had claimed another hunter. By the 2nd year, his face faded from posters. The sheriff's office moved the file into storage. Blue Hollow folk said his spirit had joined the missing, but Emily never believed in legends. She knew her husband carried discipline like armor. If he had vanished, someone or something had forced it. And the forest, silent and watchful, kept its secret under the roots of its oldest trees, waiting for the storm that would one day rip truth from the ground. November 2022. Storm clouds rolled over the Stonecrest Mountains, low and heavy. Rain hammered the slopes for 7 days without pause. Streams turned to rivers, hillsides sloughed off into gullies. Roots strained under the weight of waterlogged soil. On the 8th morning, hikers walked along an abandoned service trail near Blue Hollow. They stopped when they heard the sharp crack of splitting wood. Before them, a massive red oak toppled, shaking the ground like a falling tower. Its roots tore upward, twisting into the air like black tentacles. Soil clung in heavy clumps, dripping mud into the hollow below. The tree groaned and settled onto its side, branches shattering as they hit rock. The hikers moved closer, phones raised to capture the wreckage. The smell of damp wood mixed with raw earth. That was when one man froze mid-step, pointing toward the tangled roots. Something pale blue lay pressed into the soil, a strip of fabric, faded and torn. Beside it, a length of strap darkened by mud. The group fell silent. It didn't look like trash. It looked like something buried and forgotten. One hiker dialed 911 with trembling fingers. Deputies arrived within the hour, cordoning the scene with yellow tape. Detectives crouched low, shining flashlights into the root system. The excavation began slowly. Forensic specialists brushed mud with gloved hands. Every movement careful, every fragment documented. The first item recovered was the corner of a backpack, synthetic fabric, shredded but recognizable. Next came a hunting jacket, heavy canvas eaten by rot. Then bones emerged from the soil, a rib cage curved sideways, an arm bent unnaturally beneath the roots. Finally, the skull came into view, its surface collapsed inward on the left temple. The blow was unmistakable, deliberate, forceful, fatal. Silence spread across the excavation site. This was not an accident. This was murder. Hidden beneath a living tree, one detective traced his light along the roots. Just beyond the skull, something caught the beam. A wooden handle protruded from the bark. He pushed closer. The object was a knife, the blade buried so deep into the oak's heartwood that it could not be pulled free. It looked like rage frozen in time. Someone had stabbed the tree itself, leaving the weapon as a marker. The roots had grown around it, sealing the scene for 3 years. By nightfall, the remains were bagged and sent to the state lab. Dental records confirmed what the family had feared. The body belonged to Daniel Harper. Emily received the call in her kitchen. Her hands gripped the counter until her knuckles whitened. 3 years of silence collapsed into a single word: found. But relief never came. The autopsy ruled out accident immediately. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the skull. The body's position confirmed intent. Daniel had been dead before burial. Someone had dug a cavity beneath the oak, stuffed the body inside, and covered it again. The concealment was chillingly effective. The tree lived on, roots knitting over the grave. Nature itself became the accomplice. Forensics turned to the decayed backpack. Most of it was beyond saving, but deep inside the shoulder strap, fibers remained protected. Technicians swabbed and sequenced. The results came back within days. A full male DNA profile appeared, one that did not belong to Daniel. The match flashed on the database screen. Wade Collins, 52, a local with a long trail of arrests for poaching and illegal trapping. Collins was known among wardens as a shadow in the woods. He moved silently, took what he wanted, and vanished before patrols arrived. He had been fined, detained, and released more times than anyone could count. But one record stood out. 3 days after Daniel vanished, Collins had been stopped over 100 miles south, near Timberline. At the time, it seemed irrelevant. Now, the connection was glaring. The DNA on Daniel's backpack strap placed Collins at the scene. It was contact that could not be explained away. Detectives combed through search logs from 2019. A warden recalled speaking briefly with Collins on a back road during the early search. Collins admitted seeing a hunter on Ridge 47, but claimed they only nodded in passing. Back then, no one doubted him. Hunters crossed paths often in those woods. But paired with the DNA, the memory became sinister. The knife still lodged in the oak remained a mystery. Forensics photographed and measured, but could not extract it without destroying the wood. Its placement screamed anger more than concealment. The more investigators uncovered, the clearer the story became. Daniel had not simply vanished into the wilderness. He had crossed paths with a man who lived outside the law. The search for a missing hunter was officially over. The hunt for his killer had begun. Emily sat with her children when detectives arrived at her door. They explained what had been found beneath the oak. They told her about the DNA. Her son asked the only question that mattered, so they know who did it. Emily's eyes filled, but she nodded. The answer was yes, but justice was still far away. Detectives began building their case. They traced Collins's movements through motels, campgrounds, and remote shacks. He had no permanent address, no employer, and few friends willing to talk. Every interview painted the same picture: a drifter, a man who survived by skirting the edges of law and wilderness. As the storm-cleared hills dried, the hollow where Daniel was hidden remained taped off. The oak lay like a fallen giant, its roots a grotesque cage. Tourists kept their distance, whispering of curses and ghosts, but investigators saw no legends. They saw evidence cold, stubborn, undeniable, and with it, a path that led straight to Wade Collins. The forest had held its secret for 3 years. Now it had surrendered it, and there would be no silence until the man behind it was found. Part 3. Hunting the Poacher. Detectives knew the name now. Wade Collins, 52 years old. No steady job, no fixed address. A man who drifted between motels, shacks, and half-burned camps in the woods. He lived like a ghost. He knew how to vanish, how to slip into the tree line before headlights turned the corner. But this time, the forest would not protect him. The task force spread out across counties. They visited bait shops, roadside diners, gun clubs. Everywhere they asked the same question: when did you last see Collins? Most shook their heads. Some muttered they hadn't seen him in months. A few simply closed the door, unwilling to speak at all. The silence told its own story. Collins inspired unease even among neighbors. He was the kind of man people avoided, even if they couldn't say why. After days of dead ends, the break came as a whisper. An anonymous tip reached the sheriff's office before dawn. The caller said Collins was holed up in an old trailer near a logging site in Ridgeview County. 2 unmarked cruisers rolled up the dirt road, headlights cut through mist curling off the ground. The trailer sat hunched in the shadows, rust streaking down its sides. A thin wisp of smoke curled from a stovepipe. Someone was inside. The deputies took positions, weapons low, voices steady, through a megaphone. They called out his name. The woods echoed with silence. Then the door creaked open. Collins stepped into the morning light. His clothes were rumpled, his beard heavy, his eyes flat. He carried no weapon, only the weight of inevitability. He raised his hands. Metal cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. The manhunt was over. In the interrogation room, Collins sat with shoulders slumped. The walls were bare, the air stale. For 2 hours, he repeated the same denials. I don't know anything. I just passed him on the trail. That's all. His tone was calm, almost bored. He leaned back, staring at a blank patch of wall. Detectives traded looks across the table. Then they slid a photograph forward. It showed Daniel Harper's decayed backpack on a steel lab tray. Collins barely glanced at it. So what? He muttered. I never touched it. The words landed flat. Another sheet followed lab results, highlighted in yellow, a full DNA profile. His profile, pulled from the strap. This time, Collins' eyes flicked sideways. The mask slipped for just a heartbeat, a tightening around the jaw, a breath held too long. Detectives pressed harder. They described the oak, the cavity under the roots. They described the skull, caved in at the temple. You didn't just walk by him. Wade, one detective said, he was murdered. He was hidden like garbage, and your DNA is on his gear. The room hung in silence. Collins's fingers tapped the table once, twice, then stopped. His voice, when it came, was quieter. He admitted his first story was a lie. He hadn't just nodded and walked away. There had been an argument. He said he was tracking a deer that day. The law made the area off limits, but he didn't care. Then Daniel appeared, rifle slung, eyes sharp. Daniel recognized him as a poacher. He confronted him, told him he was breaking the law. Collins claimed Daniel threatened to take his rifle and report him. The words grew heated, Collins said. Daniel grabbed his pack to stop him leaving. A struggle broke out. I panicked, Collins said. I pushed him. I grabbed something heavy, a rock, maybe a branch, I don't know. He swung once. Daniel collapsed. When Collins checked, he wasn't breathing. The story faltered. Collins ran a hand over his face, voice rough. He said he dragged the body deeper into the trees. Hours passed as he wandered, not knowing what to do. Then he found the red oak, a hollow stretched beneath its roots. I thought maybe it could hide him. He shoved the body inside, piled earth and stones. Then he left, taking Daniel's rifle and pack. He dismantled the rifle days later, dumping parts into a swamp called Cedar Marsh. The pack, he said, he burned. When asked about the knife wedged in the oak, he shook his head. No answer came, only a long stare at the table. Detectives marked the silence. The confession was not clean. It was shaped like an excuse, not an admission. He painted himself as a man trapped by circumstance, but the details lined up. He placed himself at the scene. He admitted to striking Daniel, admitted to hiding the body. The detectives had what they needed. Second-degree murder charges were filed. Collins was booked into county jail. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Emily stood with her children, eyes rimmed red. For the first time in 3 years, there was hope of justice. Inside the cell block, Collins waited. He stared through steel bars, unblinking. For all his words, one truth lingered. Daniel Harper had walked into the forest alive, and Wade Collins had walked out alone. The trial ahead would decide the rest. But in the silence of that interrogation room, everyone present already knew. The hunter had become the hunted, and the mountains had finally given up their secret 19 days after his arrest. The guards began their morning rounds. Keys rattled against steel doors. When they reached cell 12, the silence felt wrong. Wade Collins lay on his side, unmoving. His chest did not rise. The guard shouted for medics. Paramedics rushed in, performing compressions in the narrow space. The sound of latex gloves snapped against skin, but within minutes, the call was made time of death, 6:42. The report listed a massive heart attack. No signs of struggle, no weapons smuggled in. Collins had taken the truth with him. The trial that might have exposed every detail vanished overnight. The case was left hanging between justice and silence. For Emily Harper, the news struck twice. Her husband's killer had been identified, but he would never stand in court, never face the family he destroyed. She sat at her kitchen table as detectives explained. The words blurred into background noise. All she could think was, no cross-examination, no verdict, no closure. The sheriff's office closed the file. Official cause of death. Blunt force trauma inflicted by an unknown heavy object. Perpetrator, Wade Collins. Deceased, but inside the evidence room, questions lingered. The knife, still locked inside the oak's root system, remained unexplained. Why had Collins denied placing it there? Technicians cataloged fibers collected from the site. Among them, strands of black synthetic material. They matched the kind of heat-resistant gloves used for burning trash. Investigators revisited the fire pit discovered years earlier. The theory took shape. Collins may have burned some of Daniel's belongings there, but the pack still carried his DNA, proof that not everything was destroyed. Then came the tire tracks. Though blurred by rain, casts showed deep off-road treads. They belonged to a heavy vehicle, not Daniel's pickup. That meant Collins had not walked alone. At some point, another set of wheels had passed near the hollow. Who they belonged to, no one could say. The old GPS found near Daniel's remains added another layer. Its memory was wiped clean, every waypoint erased, as if someone wanted to delete a path. Was Collins capable of that level of caution, or had another hand tried to erase the trail? The evidence raised possibilities the trial would never answer. Detectives pushed forward anyway. They wrote final notes, filed reports, sealed photographs. The system had reached its end. In Blue Hollow, whispers grew louder. Some said Collins hadn't died naturally. Some believed silence had been forced on him. Others dismissed conspiracy. They argued a lifetime of stress, poor health, and hard living finally caught up. But uncertainty always carries more weight than certainty. The oak tree itself became a landmark. Hikers stopped to stare at its exposed roots. Some left tokens, flowers, a cross, even a flashlight. Emily visited once, standing with her children. She placed a framed photograph of Daniel against the trunk. Her son set down his father's old pocket knife beside it. The air was quiet. Leaves rustled faintly, as though the forest breathed with them. For the family, this was the only grave they had. Reporters asked Emily if she believed justice had been served. Her answer was measured. The forest gave him back. The rest, we may never know. Back at the sheriff's office, detectives reviewed their timeline one last time. October 14th, 2019. Daniel Harper enters Ridge 47. October 23rd. Search suspended. November 2022. Storm uproots oak. Remains discovered. DNA leads to Collins. December 2022. Collins arrested. Confesses partial guilt. January 2023. Collins dead in jail. Case closed by necessity. But case unsolved in spirit. The story spread online. Message boards dissected every detail. Some painted Collins as a lone killer driven by rage. Others insisted he couldn't have staged the cover-up alone. The hollow beneath the oak, the erased GPS, the knife, each clue hinted at layers still buried. The mountains remained indifferent. Snow blanketed the ridges, muffling footsteps. Wind whistled through abandoned trails. Hunters who once knew Daniel spoke of him around campfires. They remembered a man who valued rules, who never cut corners. A man who deserved more than silence. For his children, the story became part of growing up. They asked why their father never came back. Emily chose honesty. Because someone took him from us. No verdict could return what was lost. No file stamped closed could erase the hollow left behind. But truth, even partial, was better than endless absence. Years later, hikers still pause at the fallen oak. The roots, twisted and bare, form a cage above empty soil, a reminder of what the storm revealed. Some call it cursed, some call it sacred. To Emily, it is simply where the truth surfaced. The Stonecrest Mountains keep many secrets, but this one broke free when nature itself tore the ground apart. What remained was neither full justice nor complete mystery, only both. The hunter's story ended not with a trial, but with a tree, not with a verdict, but with whispers. And in those whispers, the forest still speaks.